Alright, it's time to route the board. If you haven't yet, be sure to save. I usually save just as I go, just naturally. So we're going to switch over to the board. We're going to generate the board from the schematic and the respective file. And here we have our entire board and all our components. So what I'm going to do is switch from mils to millimeters. So I'm going to do grid. I'll just change it manually to millimeter. I like this to be 1. I like this to be 0.5 or always half of that. We're going to turn on the grid on. And here we are. So I want this board to be 40 millimeters and 30 millimeters in height. Change this, be 40, great. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually center the board here. If you're using the free version of Eagle, you probably won't be able to do this, so you can leave it just like this. If you aren't using a free version of Eagle and you have the luxury of actually putting components on the other quadrants of the board, then go ahead and change this to -20 and this to +20. So we keep our dimensions, but now it's kind of perfectly centered. This will help align some things where we need it. And it is going to be important to align the connector on both the display module and the control module. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my DRC. So I'm going to type DRC, load, and I'm going to pick my Arcatek DRU 2-layer board. Great. Tell me I have a bunch of errors, of course, because I haven't done anything yet and nothing's connected. So the first thing that we can start with is laying out the connector. So this is going to be the most important thing for both the display and the control module. I want this to be perfectly centered. So I'm going to change the position to 0. And this I'll just leave it 24.6, or I'll just put 24. And then let's move it into place. I'll probably have to change the resolution in a second. So I know it's perfectly centered, but I want the connector, this is where the connector will lie, to be right lined up with the board. So I actually want to put it down. So I'm going to actually go back to grid, change to 0.1. I probably meant to do that earlier. Drag it down just a little bit, right on the border. I guess I can move it down just a little hair and make sure again that the position for the X is 0. Great, and actually I lied. This is supposed to be 33. So go ahead and change that to 33. And then we're going to move the board up. Move it just a tiny bit more. Right there is fine. Cool. So if you're off a little bit, that's fine. It really won't make a difference as long as it's centered. Because when we do the display, we're going to make sure that it is perfectly centered also, and you want the boards to align. Alright, so the next thing we do is we can add the resistors. So each of the resistors are aligned with the pins on the connector, except for ground, of course. So let's go ahead and do that. Careful when you click on them, sometimes they get stuck on some other things. Rotate it into position, put it relatively where it goes. And you may have to click info, click on the device, and change the exact position. I don't know why Eagle does this, but sometimes it'll throw off the position. I would do it to 1 decimal place, and that'll make sure you're fine, assuming that you have your grid to 0.1. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and add the others. I'm just going to cheat and just do move R1. I want to place it maybe not relatively in the location, because again we have to change the position. So let's go ahead and do that with all of the other resistors. Alright, let's start lining them up. Make sure you change this if you haven't. Alright, so we have all the resistors. As you notice, the spacing is not perfect, so they start to slant a little bit. You can, if you want, move them all a little bit to the right, and it'll appear a little bit more even, but you don't have to worry about that. So we have all the resistors placed. The next thing we're going to do is place some of these other components.